I like to explain this link between high self-esteem and school achievement with something I call the poker chip theory of self-esteem. Let's take two people, Bob and Jay, for example. Let's say Bob and Jay are going to play poker. And Bob has 100 chips and Jay has 10. Bob has 100 and Jay has 10. Who's likely to play more cautiously in this game? That's right, Jay. Why? Well, if Jay loses 2 bets of 5, he's out of the game. But Bob can lose 20 bets of 5 before he's out of the game, so he's got more to risk. So let's say Bob and Jay come to school, Bob with his 100 chips and Jay with 10. Where's Bob going to sit? Probably up in the front. Where's Jay going to sit? In the back. Who's going to raise their hand in class more often? The kid with the most chips, the highest self-esteem. Who's going to hand in more homework? Who will volunteer to go to the blackboard more often? Who's going to go out for the school play or try out for an athletic team or the band or the choir? That's right, the kid who has more self-esteem. Now, what is self-esteem? Most researchers say it's the experience of feeling lovable, worthwhile, and capable. Now, everything you do is either building up or tearing down that sense of lovableness, capableness, or worthwhileness. Anytime you say something like, shame on you, you better stop crying or I'll give you something to really cry about. What are you, a wimp, sissy? Any of those kind of things are going to affect their self-esteem. It's not easy to take in words like I'm stupid, you dummy, you wimp, you crybaby. I want to be building up that self-esteem by saying positive things. I like you. I love you. You're a great kid. So let's look at some specific techniques for how to make a child feel more lovable and worthwhile. I heard a speaker once say, love is spelled T-I-M-E by children. That's right, time. We need to give kids more time. We have research that shows that the average parent only spends 12.5 to 14.5 minutes a day interacting with their children. 12.5 if it's the father, and 14.5 minutes if it's the mother. And 8.5 of those minutes are spent arguing about bedtime, homework, television, eating habits, all those kind of things. Leaving 4 to 6 minutes a day for the development of self-esteem, passing on to the cultural values, building ethics and integrity, and so forth into the child. We know that kids need more time than that. 20 minutes to an hour is much better than 12 minutes. Spend time each day with your child. I know it's difficult. Some of you listening to this are single parents. Some of you are two parents together, but you're both working to make ends meet. Sometimes you don't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock and you got 3 kids pulling on you. But you've got to take more time to spend with those kids. One of the things you can do is spend time alone. Make a date with children. There are all kinds of things you can do. You can go out for a frozen yogurt. You can go shoot some pool. You can play basketball in the backyard. You can play frisbee. You can play a game of checkers. You can go for a walk. You can take the kids shopping with you. Go down to the playground and play on the swing together. Go skiing. Whatever it might be. Overnight trips are really great. If you can take a kid to another city and go to a museum or a baseball game, a pro game, something like that. Make dates for your children. Make dates with your children so that you have time together where they're not having pressure on you and you having to be pulled in 8 million different directions. Your older kids, you may find that you need to take along a friend because a lot of times they feel, oh, I'm just with my dad or my mom. This is kind of weird. But if you take a friend with you to go to a concert or a game, you'll find that your kids will want to spend that time with you. And those become some of the most treasured moments in their memories of their childhood. Another thing that's critical is that you have to listen to your children. Take time to really listen. I was at a suicide prevention conference where I was a speaker once, and there were 6 kids up on stage who had tried to commit suicide but hadn't achieved it. And when they were interviewing the kids, one of the kids was asked, did you talk to your mom about these feelings of depression you had before you decided to commit suicide? He said, well, she was never home. Never home? Well, where was she all the time? Turned out his mother was the director of one of the Orange County suicide prevention hotlines. She was always out helping other people's children instead of her own. And when I began to examine that, I discovered that why it was because she was uncomfortable with her own child, talking about those kinds of feelings. With other children, she could be the expert. She was withdrawn. She was distant. It wasn't as important for her to be as connected. She could distance herself from those kids and their problems. But with her own child, it was more awkward. It was more uncomfortable. And we have to learn to be willing to be awkward and uncomfortable with our children and really listen to the things that are sometimes hard to hear about our own parenting, about how they feel, because often we want their lives to be perfect and they're not. So really set aside time each week to really listen to your child. And when they come to you and they want to talk, Turn off the TV. Stop what you're doing. Sit down, eye to eye, and really connect with them. And don't interrupt them when they're talking. Listen. Every once in a while, use what we call minimal encouragers. Say, I understand. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got that. I see. So that they know you're listening. Maintain eye contact with them the whole time. Don't be looking away. Don't be looking over your shoulder to see what's happening with the football game. But really be listening to them. You want to have a time where you can spend alone so that child knows I'm important. I'm more important than football. I'm more important than anything else that my mom or dad might want to be doing. And remember, the purpose of listening is to understand. Bruno Bettelheim, who was a very famous child psychologist who died just a few years ago, said the number one cause of emotional upset among teenagers and mental health problems among teenagers in America was the fact that nobody listened to them and took them seriously. So you really have to listen and care about what you're hearing. One of the things we teach is to reflect back to the child what it is you hear them saying. We call this active listening. You can say things at the end of a couple paragraphs like, so what I hear you saying is, or in other words, what you're trying to tell me is, or so how you feel about that is, or let's see, if I understand this, what you're saying is, so that they know very clearly that you understood them. Now don't be surprised if a few times they'll stop you and say, no, that's not at all what I mean. You weren't listening here. And then have them repeat it. And after 2 or 3 times, sometimes you'll get the message. It's that taking of the time that lets them know that they're important. Another thing you can do to help kids have a sense of high self-esteem and feel lovable is to do what we call giving them unconditional love. I don't want my child to feel I'm going to withdraw my love if their room isn't clean, or if they don't have high grades, or they don't do such and such that I want them to do. I want them to really know I'm going to love them no matter what. That my love for them is not conditional on the way they look, their grades, who they date, whether or not they make the football team. I want them to know they don't have to earn my love. My love is a given. This becomes very subtle because sometimes in our conversation we'll say things like, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you because you got such good grades in school. You're an A student. Gosh, that makes me proud of you. Now, if the child begins to think that the reason you love them is because they got good grades, then the problem's going to be that they're going to think, if I get bad grades, mom and dad won't love me. In fact, I have a friend who knows a parent whose daughter tried to commit suicide after going to high school and getting all A's in junior high school and then getting a bunch of C's on her first report card in high school. And the parents were devastated. They couldn't imagine because they were always giving her all this praise. But see, the praise was always linked to performance as opposed to I just love you for who you are. So you have to be very careful in your conversation with children that they don't begin to think you're just going to love them for how they are or what they do rather than for the essence of them. A lot of times I think of that song, The Beatles, Will You Still Love Me When I'm Old and Gray, when I'm 65? And the idea is there, if my hair falls out, will you still love me? Or do you just love me because I have good-looking hair? So it's real important that we say, I love you to our children with no strings attached, and so that they really get that. Another area of building the lovableness side of self-esteem is accepting their feelings, acceptance of who they really are. One of the things you want to do is listen to your children for their feelings. Sometimes we tend to deny children their feelings. We'll say things to them like, well, this is nothing to be so upset over. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Crying isn't going to help. Or we tell the children what he or she should be feeling. Come on, cheer up, Johnny. It's not that bad. Or look at the bright side. You should really be happy about this. Or we'll compare our child to another. We'll say, the same thing happened to Natalie Schwartz last week, and she didn't cry about it. She didn't go into a fit. Or we'll respond with sarcasm and ridicule. Well, that certainly is something to get angry about. Oh, is that all that's bothering you? I thought it was something really important. Or we'll use threats and name-calling. Don't be a crybaby. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to really cry about, was one of my dad's favorite phrases. Or what a hothead. You got a short fuse. I remember a situation where a child was telling his parents, I'm really hungry, Dad. And Dad was saying, you can't be hungry. You had a big lunch. It's like the kid had a sense of that my dad knows my feelings better than I do. And I'm denied. What you want to say is, wow, I guess you are hungry. Well, it's frustrating to wait for dinner to be prepared so long. Maybe you could have a piece of toast or eat some carrots or something, and then you wouldn't be so hungry. You could wait a little longer till dinner. So acknowledge the child's feelings. Don't make their feelings wrong. It just frustrates the child and makes them feel like there's something wrong with them. Another thing we recommend in terms of accepting feelings is a family technique we call having a heart talk. One of the greatest times that's usable in families is the dinner time. And yet we now know that the average child in America is watching 6 3/4 hours of television a day. They're sitting around the TV with their parents at dinner instead of talking to each other. So I want to recommend you take time to have your family sit down at least 3 nights a week, and instead of the TV, have a conversation about how you're feeling, what your goals are, what successes you've had, etc. Now, we have some guidelines for an effective family heart talk, we call it, or a circle talk. One of the things we do in our family is we actually bought a beanbag heart made out of velour. It's red, and we pass that heart around. Now, you could just cut out a piece of paper in the shape of a heart, or you could use a teddy bear. And the guidelines are you have to sit in a circle, and you pass the heart around with the agreement that whoever's holding this object, this heart or the teddy bear, is the only person allowed to talk. Everyone else has to listen. You can't interrupt them. You can't say, that's wrong, or that's stupid, or when I was a kid. You just listen. The heart always goes to the left, so you know when your turn is coming. And if a person doesn't want to talk, he or she can say, I pass. And you never pressure anyone to speak. You just pass the heart to the next person. And the last guideline is everyone is to stay in the group until it's over, and nobody can use what's said in the group to tease other people or put them down later. Now, here's some topics you can use in a heart talk. What did you learn today? How do you feel right now in life? What do you need more of that you're not getting? What are you proud of? Is there anything you'd like help with from mom or dad or me? What are you afraid of? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's the biggest challenge you're currently facing? If you could change anything about yourself, what would it be? Or if you could change anything about this family, what would it be? Another time to have a heart talk is when there are upset feelings, like maybe you can't decide who's going to go to what place for vacation in the summer, or what you're going to do for the weekend, or how you're going to spend a certain amount of money the family just got, or your allowance, or whatever it might be. Maybe someone just got grounded for 2 weeks. There's a lot of feelings present, or there's just been a fight. This is a perfect time to have a heart talk. Just pass the object around. Everybody gets a chance to talk about their feelings. Another thing you can do to build self-esteem on the lovable side is touch. It's very important that every child gets touched every day. We have a rule in our house that you have to get at least 12 hugs before you go to bed at night. Now, you can snuggle and cuddle. You can hold kids. You can roughhouse with them. You can tousle their hair. You can sit together on the couch with your arms around each other. For young children, breastfeeding is real important. Even if you're bottle feeding your baby, you want to be holding the child when you're bottle feeding them, rather than just putting a bottle in their mouth and letting them sit alone in a bed or in a high chair somewhere. There was a doctor in France named René Spitz, and he was called into a hospital because the children were dying, and they didn't know if it was some disease or a virus or what. And he couldn't find any disease, any bacteria, any virus that was causing the problem. But what he began to notice was that none of the children were ever getting picked up when they were being given their bottles. This was an orphanage hospital where the parents had abandoned the children. And the nurses would just come by and stick the bottles in their mouths. He had been in a hospital in Mexico earlier where he'd always seen the children were being rocked and cuddled and so forth when they were being bottle fed. And they never would have any problems with this kind of disease, the kids dying. So he simply recommended to the people in the hospital, every time you're going to go and give them a bottle, would you just rock the babies for maybe 5 minutes and then put them back in their cribs before you go to the next one? And sure enough, all the babies stopped dying. And so René Spitz established that a basic human need is the need for touch. And many of us don't get enough of our touching needs met. We have 4,000 square inches of skin on our body, and all of that wants to be touched and caressed and cuddled and held. And so we have something called skin hunger if we don't get that need met. And then you'll find kids will start to act out. They'll be hitting kids or pushing kids to try to get those needs for touching met if they can't get it met in a gentle, nurturing way. Now, what about my middle school or high school student where they start to be a little bit embarrassed? Oh, Mom, come on, don't touch me in front of my friends. And that's a good guideline. I wouldn't be hugging, touching, trying to kiss your teenager in front of their friends. Even alone, they'll sometimes resist it. But don't you stop, because if you do, they'll notice it. Like I'll pat them on the butt, give them a high five, handshake, run up behind them and do a hug attack, that kind of thing, roughhouse with them, whatever. So they know that they're getting loved on a physical basis. See, one of the things we know about people is there are 3 input channels to get information into their brain. One is auditory, you got to tell them. 2 is physical, you got to touch them. And 3 is visual, you got to show them. And each child has a different dominance. Some kids have to be told more than others. Mom, do you still love me? Dad, did I do that okay? Some want to see it. If I don't take them somewhere, like to Pizza Hut or something for dinner, if I don't bring them something from a trip, if I don't write them a little birthday card or leave a Post-it on the mirror telling them how much I love them, then they don't get it because they need to see it. The kinesthetically dominant child needs to feel it. That's the kid that's always coming over, kind of hanging around for a hug, whatever. And so those kids have to be touched. And what I recommend is do all 3. Tell them you love them, show them, and touch them. Now, another arena that we need to look at for high self-esteem is what we call feeling unique and special. One thing you can do is tell the child they're special. You know, Kyle, there's never been another child like you in the whole history of the world. Your artwork is so unique. You know, you learned to ride your bicycle faster than anyone I know. You're so funny. You make me laugh all day. Gosh, I love you. Those are just a few of the kind of things you can do. Now, here's some projects you can do to help your child feel special and unique. You can make an I am special and loved poster. Take a photograph of the kid, like a 3x5, put it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, write the child's name on it, then have them describe themselves to you. And if they're too young to write, you write down all the things they say. And if they're old enough to write, they can write them down. Things that make them unique. I have blue eyes. I've got brown hair. I have a big smile. I play baseball. I spell well. I can count to 500 without stopping. I ride a bicycle. I can sing Frère Jacques in French. I have a scar in the back of my left hand. I love pizza with double cheese, and so on. Whatever it is, their favorite rock group, whatever it might be. There won't be another person in the world that has that exact same combination. And then take this I am special and love poster and put it on the refrigerator or the wall in the kitchen or in their bedroom. Another thing you can do is keep a scrapbook. You can make one or buy one. And include in it birthday cards, photographs, awards they've won, or ribbons, medals, special letters or newspaper clippings of school events they participate in, maybe a program from a dance recital they were in. All these kind of things allow them to see their progression, the sense they've been successful, and that they are unique and special. As the kids get older, obviously, they can keep it on their own. The third thing you might do is make an I'm special box. You can get a shoe box or a jewelry box or any other kind of box and decorate it together and make a place for your child to keep special things in. Things they've won, objects that have meant something to them, maybe a postcard they got on a trip to Washington. And make sure you allow your child to keep this box private. It's their special box. That gives them a sense of ownership and uniqueness and a sense of boundaries that can't be transgressed by the parents. Another technique I teach is what I call the 3 pictures. Take 3 photographs of your child, one of them doing something where they're happy, one of them with the whole family being loving and happy together, and a third one with your child doing something they do really well, like skateboard or play baseball or whatever it might be. And then you take these pictures, 8x10s are the best, and you frame them, and you put them on the wall next to their bed, or you put them on a table next to their bed, so that every night when they see these, subliminally the message is, I'm lovable, I'm a happy child, and I'm capable, I can do something well. We now know from the research that what a child or an adult thinks about in the last 20 to 30 minutes before they go to sleep, their unconscious is going to replay over and over about 14 times that night, versus the rest of the things that go on during the day, they're only going to process about 6 times. So the unconscious is going to be playing with the things you say right before they go to sleep, the kind of things they're watching on television. So we don't want to be watching Friday the 13th, Part 7. We want them to be reading a bedtime story that has a moral or a value in it. We want to tell them how much we love them, talk about solutions to problems and goals and dreams they have. Because if you do that, then that's what their unconscious is going to be playing with all night long instead of a fight they had with you or something negative they heard or whatever. Another thing I recommend on the competence side is don't ever do anything for your children that they can do for themselves. Don't tie their shoes for them if they can tie them themselves. When my children were 2 years old and 4 years old, they were able to get up, go down, make oatmeal, cook, wash, clean their own room, whatever it was that they needed to do, they could do it. If you think for them, if you do things for them that they can do or think or figure out for themselves, they're going to be in trouble. I'll give you an example. I went skiing with some friends recently, and we got up to Yosemite National Park, and I said, why don't you come over for a drink? And they said, no, we'll be too busy unpacking the kids' stuff. I said, unpacking the kids' stuff? Why don't they unpack their own stuff? Oh, they'll want to go skiing. And I remember saying to her, well, who packed their stuff up? She said, well, I did. I said, you're going to make some woman really upset someday, because when she marries your son, he's going to expect her to do everything for him. Don't do anything for your children they can do for themselves. Don't rescue them. I have a 1-year-old I mentioned, Christopher, and he has a little Fisher-Price walking support that he goes around with just as he's learning to walk. And he'll get stuck in the corner, and I just want to go over and pick it up and extricate him and make it all simple for him. And I just have to bite my tongue and hold on not to do that, to let him figure it out for himself. If I never let him struggle with it, he doesn't develop what we call the struggle muscle. Then when he gets to school, he wants everything to be easy. He wants people to rescue him. You have to let people struggle with things and do it on their own. It's important to have high standards for your children, but they also need to be realistic standards. If they're too low, then he won't expect that he needs to do anything. If they're too high, then he's going to feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. You want to have a positive focus for your children. Focus on their successes, what they do well rather than what they do wrong. There's a popular term in parenting now called catch them doing something right. We often want to wait till our children screw up, and then we go over and we discipline them, we give them attention, and as long as they're doing well, we kind of leave them alone. But the reality is they need to have attention and focusing and feedback when they do things right. When you're giving kids feedback, you want to give it to them as soon as possible. You want to give them frequent feedback. Right after it happens, let them know several times during the day how much you love them, what a good job they're doing, that they made a difference, that they're picking up the clothes made your life easier, and so forth. When you're giving directions, keep those positive as well. If you say, Sally, don't fight with the babysitter, don't give your brother a hard time, and don't forget to do your homework. What you've said to the unconscious is fight with your babysitter, give your brother a hard time, and forget to do your homework. What you want to say is cooperate with the babysitter. I expect you to share with your brother. And remember to do your homework. When I come home, I expect to hear a good report about what you did. I often have people in my workshops close their eyes and I'll say a sentence, the dog is not chasing the cat. And invariably what people will see is a dog chasing a cat. Because the unconscious doesn't hear the word not. It just basically doesn't know how to deal with the negative. So what you want to do is state everything in the positive with your children. Another thing you can do is Scotch guard your child. Now what does that mean? Your children are going to go out into a world where they won't always get the kind of positive and loving feedback you give them. They're going to go out into the world sometimes and have an experience of people putting them down, saying negative things, being nasty or whatever. So I teach my kids a little phrase. It says, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. And we practice that at home. We make a game out of it. And I'll tell them we're going to do it, and then I'll say, I'm going to think up things that are really negative, and I'm going to say them to you. And what I want you to do is repeat back to me, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. For example, I'll have them close their eyes, and then I'll say to them, boy, that was really stupid. And they'll say, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. Or I'll say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And they'll say, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. Hey, brace face, you look really dumb. No matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. So that becomes an internalized response to whenever they get negative feedback. Sometimes you're going to have to give children feedback about misbehavior, things they did wrong. It's real important that you give them feedback about the behavior and not them as a child. See, if you say you're such a slob, you live like a pig, oink, 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 that kind of thing, then you're definitely giving the kid feedback about him or herself. You should be so ashamed of yourself. What's wrong with you? What you want to say is when you leave your clothes all over the house, I get irritated because I spend the whole afternoon having to pick up after everyone. I want to be able to do other things with my time. I don't want to have to pick up after you all day. I want you to pick up after yourself. Now the basic concept here, or the formula is, when you blank, I feel blank, and what I want you to do is blank. So when you leave your clothes around, I feel irritated, and what I want you to do is pick up after yourself. So that you're letting them know how they affect you, which leaves their self-esteem intact and gives them an opportunity to make a contribution to you rather than feeling like they're bad. If I say, bad girl, get away from there. You shouldn't be ashamed of yourself for hurting your baby brother. What's wrong with you? Instead say, I'm upset that you hurt baby Timmy. Now he's crying and I have to deal with it. I want you to be more gentle when you touch him or leave him alone. Now the same is true for praise. You want to be specific. Not you're a wonderful little boy, you're such an angel. But when you cooperate with your brother like that, I feel so happy because I can get some things done on my desk without having to break up a fight every 10 minutes. Makes my life so much easier. Thanks. I appreciate that. Remember to express appreciation when your children are helpful. Say thank you. Thank you for helping me carry the groceries in. Saved me about 5 minutes of work. Now I'm going to get some time for myself. Thanks a lot, Johnny. Look for opportunities to give them feedback, to give them strokes, positive feedback. One thing we did in our house for a while is we created a good deeds bulletin board. And anytime we'd catch someone doing something right, we'd write it up on the board. Chris picked up his room without being asked. Bobby did all of her homework before dinner. John helped set the table. Chris fed the dog all week without having to be reminded. And every day they're looking up there to see what we caught them. And if we didn't catch them, they'll often come up and say, Dad, you didn't get the time that I did such and such up on the board. And we'll say, okay, I got it, and then we'll write it up. Another thing you want to do is reinforce each and every step in the learning process. Don't wait for the final result. You know, if you're trying to get the kid to learn to clean up his own room, and you go in, the room's not clean, but the desk is clean and all the area around it's clean, comment on that. Say, gosh, Johnny, after a half hour, you got your desk all cleaned up already. And the area around it's looking good too. I bet by 7 o'clock, the whole room will be clean. So you start focusing on what has been done and then projecting a positive expectation of the future. Another technique for building children's sense of power and competence is giving them choices whenever possible. Whenever we give choices to children, we're saying, I value and respect your taste and your judgment. You are important. I think you can do it. Here's some choices you might want to give your children. Do you want to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt today? Do you want to set the table before or after this TV show? Do you want to take a bath or a shower tonight? Do you want to clean the living room or the dining room? Would you rather have the plain or the mint-flavored toothpaste? Would you rather have Cheerios or cornflakes? Do you want to hug Daddy before you put your pajamas on or after you put them on? Now notice all those choices still get what I want done, but it gives the child an opportunity to have some choice rather than just saying, go put your pajamas on. Now such choices might not seem that important to us as adults. The issues seem pretty minor. But to a child, they are very meaningful because the issue to them is one of personal power. Choices give them a way to exercise control over parts of their lives. Choices make them more grown up. Choices build high self-esteem. One last technique you can do is to create an achievement bulletin board. One where you put up all of their successes, schoolwork that they got an A or a B plus in, their artwork, their merit badges, a medal they got, a picture with motocross trophy on it. Somewhere that every day they can look and see this growing board of their successes. It says we are a successful family and we're a successful person. Another thing you want to do with kids is have them set goals. We now know that only 3% of people in America have written goals for the year. Only 3%. We also know that only 3% of Americans die financially independent. And we think there's an overlap. There are 3 main reasons kids don't set goals. 1, they never see their parents do it. 2, they're not taught in school, which is unfortunate in this country. You'd think that would be different. And 3, they're afraid of failure. They're afraid if they set a goal, then they'll be committed and they'll have to do it. So I want you to start setting goals with your children. Let them know what your goals are. And then model that for them. Talk about when you've achieved the goal. Talk about when you're frustrated about the goal. Things you've had to do to get your goal to come in on time. Make sure that they stay on track. One technique you can use that we used in our house is what we call the goalpost. We actually made a big bulletin board that looked like a football goalpost. And we had everyone fill out 3x5 cards with their name on it and then a goal they had. Like I'm going to earn a Schwinn bicycle by my paper route by June 15th. Or I'm going to be on time to school for 2 weeks in a row without missing one day. Or I'm going to play 18 holes of golf and score under 90. And then when they achieve their goal, they get to move the football to the top of the goalpost. So it starts out on the lower part of the bulletin board, and when they achieve the goal, you move the football up to the top, and everyone gets to celebrate and talk about what they did. So they begin to have this daily, weekly habit of setting goals. It's very important to have goals and achieve goals if you're going to have high self-esteem. One last thing. Take time every day to have your children close their eyes and visualize their goals as if they're already achieved. What it would look like, what it would feel like if they'd already gotten an A, had certain person as a boyfriend or a girlfriend, were able to ride their tricycle, whatever it might be. So what happens is when the children visualize the goal as if it's already achieved, it actually turns on firing in the brain cells that allow the nervous system to begin to do whatever's necessary to achieve the goal. Miraculous changes. Great time for visualizing is when the kids first wake up and right again before they go to sleep at night when they're in their bed. One last thing for yourself. Please work on your own self-esteem. Read books, listen to tapes, take seminars, go to workshops, go to a counselor if you need. Keep building your self-esteem, because the best thing you can do for your children is to model high self-esteem for yourself. Well, it's been a pleasure to give you these ideas. I hope they're as useful to you as they've been to me. Make sure you start putting one of these into action every day. One a day, multiple vitamin tablet for self-esteem. Good luck, and thank you for listening.